attendance get that has to happen. एक जन बाहेर थांबलं तर attendance distribute करायला. तुम्हाला बाहेरून अटेंड करता येईल ना ऑनलाईन.
Sorry, hello.
I feel that we're at the Olympics, getting ready for the beginning of a race, and everybody is quiet. Now I have a big screen of myself, which I don't need, and a small screen of you. I would prefer to see a big screen of you and a small screen of myself.
No, sir, you are our guest. We are the host.
I know, but I'm speaking to you. I don't have to bore myself. So if you can switch it back, I would be thankful.
Done now? Okay, sir. Can we start now, Principal sir?
Yes.
We whatever you want.
Okay. So on behalf of Department of English as well as Students' Council and Student Welfare Committee of our college, I take this opportunity to extend warm welcome to our distinguished speaker of today's online session, Honorable Dr. Gerald Cupchik, Professor, University of Toronto, Canada, who has accepted our invitation to guide our students on the topic, Imagining Ourselves in the Changing World. So I extend warm welcome to everyone. Now I request our Dynamic College Principal, Professor Dr. S.K. Patil, to give profile of our college to our guest.
Good morning, everybody. The Department of English, in collaboration with the Student Council and Student Welfare Committee of C.K. Thakur College, New Panvel, Maharashtra, India, has organized the guest lecture on imagining ourselves in the changing world. And I would like to welcome here the speaker of today's session, Dr. Gerald Cupchik, Professor, University of Toronto, Canada. So at the outset, I would like to welcome all the participants for this important session on imagining ourselves in the changing world. I would like to introduce our college, C.K. Thakur Arts, Commerce and Science College, New Panvel Autonomous. The college is a multi-faculty premier institution of higher education with enrollment of more than 4,500 students and offers 15 undergraduate, 13 postgraduate and 9 PhD centers and different career-oriented certificate, diploma and remedial courses. C.K. Thakur College has a vibrant work culture with holistic approach to education. The academic results have always been higher than the university results. And because of the holistic development and excellence in academics, cultural, sports, social, and research activities at university, state, and national levels, our college becomes the youngest college in India to complete the 3 cycles of NAAC accreditation with A grade in the first and second cycle and A+ grade with 3.61 CGPA in the third cycle of re-accreditation. The college has established career guidance and placement cell and has taken the initiative to establish entrepreneurship cell and skill hub to provide help, support and guidance to our students. The college has well-equipped central library with infrastructure, IT infrastructure, 92,000 books, 910 audiovisual material, 65 periodicals, e-books, and institutional membership of ImplementNet and Delnet. This is the important year for the college where we are celebrating the silver jubilee year of the college, where we have identified the different student-oriented activities and we have been conducting those activities throughout the year.
Yeah.
In the period of COVID-19 pandemic, when many colleges have taken complete halt, but we at C.K. Thakur College consistently continued our teaching and learning activities with sense of commitment and zeal by observing proper protocols of the COVID-19. Here, the today's particular topic is imaging ourselves in the changing world. Because of the COVID-19, many changes have been taken place. And just now, we have observed the earthquake in the Turkestan, where now the situation has been changing drastically. We have to change in accordingly. If we stop the comparing to the others and be authentic and genuine as possible, we will change ourselves positively and create a massive positive impact on the world. So this is the right time where we should learn something about the imaging ourselves in the changing world. So once again, on behalf of our college, I would like to welcome Dr. Gerald Cupchik, sir, the professor, University of Toronto, Canada, and I would like to request him for his valuable guidance on the topic, imaging ourselves in the changing world. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Dr. S.K. Patil, for giving profile of our college to our distinguished guests. Now I take this golden opportunity to introduce the guest of today's online session, Professor Dr. Gerald Cupchik. He has completed his bachelor's degree from University of Michigan, as well as master's degree from University of Wisconsin and PhD from University of Wisconsin in 1972. And he is also a postdoctoral fellow who completed his postdoctoral from University of Toronto on the topic experiential aesthetics. He has 32 years of teaching experience. He has tremendous and commendable achievements in the field of research also. And with regards to his research, it is our pleasure and it's our joy that it's our pride also that, and a source of inspiration to all of us, that you have completed 109 research papers and published it in various national as well as international journals of high repute and standard. It consists of scopus as well as other benchmarking of various international journals. Dr. Gerald has also published 40 chapters in various books, as well as authored 4 books. He has been a recipient of various awards like Gustav Feicher Award, International Association for Empirical Aesthetics, as well as Rudolf Ahim Award, Division 10 of American Psychological Association, and Fellow International Association for Empirical Aesthetics. He has certain distinctions in his credits, and it consists of, he has also performed his duties as a president of International Society for the Empirical Study of Literature, as well as worked as a president, Division 10, Psychology and the Arts, American Psychological Association, as well as performed his duties as a president of International Association for Empirical Aesthetics. He has also delivered lectures in various conferences across the world. And today we are so fortunate to have amongst us Dr. Gerald, who will be guiding us, sharing his expertise, knowledge, and views to all our students on the topic, imagining ourselves in the changing world. And this activity we are organizing on the occasion of Silver Jubilee year celebration of our college. So with this brief introduction, his CV is more than 30 pages. So there is no, because of time constraint, with this brief introduction, I welcome Professor Dr. Gerald Cupchik, Professor in Psychology from University of Toronto. And I request Professor Gerald Cupchik to begin his session to our students. Over to you, sir.
First of all, I want to thank you for inviting me to do the presentation this evening here and in the morning in your part of the world. I'm a very, very lucky guy. I decided to be a professor of social psychology for whatever reason when I was 12 years old. And I've been a professor now actually for more than 50 years, 50, and I haven't lost the energy. And I haven't lost the energy because of the pleasure of my students from whom I've learned so much, and my outreach to dear friends in India who share with me their culture. We have a study going on classical Indian dance even now. Now, it's always difficult to prepare a lecture because you have to consider the different audiences. So I'm going to do something as a kind of story of my life and take you a kind of little adventure where we're going to go from stepping stone to stepping stone. I keep in the back of my mind the fact that I'm talking in part to people in the English department, so there'll be a kind of little digression into things that are relevant to them. But I will try to make some general themes. I'm going to speak for 50 minutes. You can ask me questions after. Generally, students are frightened to do so. So I've left my email address. And if someone wants to send me a note and ask me a question, I will shock you by the speed of my response. So let me begin. A semiotician once said to me, he says, you know, Jerry, what is not emotion and does it exist? And so I asked the question, what is not imagination and does it exist? Imagination is part of the web of experience, bringing together thoughts and feelings, sensations and images in a unified structure. We have hallucinations, we have daydreams, we have fantasies, we have structured planning, we have visualization, we have all kinds of insight. So imagination spans the arts and the sciences. Imagination is the secret to our adjustments, our careers, and the futures of our students. We, in a sense, move between belief and imagination. We believe that our world is real, and yet we can escape into the privacy of our own minds. So I'm going to do the following. When do these acts of imagination occur and why? What value does imagination have? Someone might say, well, you know, his little son has an incredible imagination, but I'm an adult. Do I have to have an imagination too? And so I'm going to take you on a tour of stepping stones through a world of imagination so it can be useful to you, both professors and students in your lives, as it is to me. Now, the goal of the lecture is to build a bridge between imagination in everyday life and imagination in the arts, because we live in both worlds. I do scientific research with fMRI, and I do research on reading and looking at paintings. I have a foot in both worlds that keeps me fresh. Now, the way I want to do this is I want to just lock us into thinking about situations and episodes. We find ourselves in situations in our lives. We find ourselves in the middle of events in our lives that require actions and reactions. Let me explain. When we talk about actions in our life, we've all just gone through the COVID pandemic. I've collected some data there and looked at the resilience of students who survived the pandemic and the students who've been alienated from the university, isolated at home without emotional support and physical support. And it's been incumbent upon us as a university to reach out to them. So what is the role of action in our life? It is fundamental to the theme of coping. It is fundamental to survival. Imagination is not far from survival. In everyday perception, we look for information in situations and we disregard irrelevancies and we want to be accurate. If you're being chased by a bear, you must be clear about how best to escape. It is a matter of survival. And as we mature, and we hope this both for ourselves as teachers and for our students, that we become more logical, more efficient, and more effective in our coping in everyday life. How does this relate to imagination? How does this stimulate acts of imagination? When the situation is ambiguous, it invites us to enter and interpret it. We have to interpret, and it is the ambiguity that opens the door for misperception, inaccuracies, distortions. We need this accurate information to survive. And sometimes, even as we plan our lives, when I was 12, I decided to do what I'm doing today. I'm 75 years old and I'm not leaving. See? How do I preserve that energy? How do I do that planning? Why am I not burned out? As all the professors together, we understand our quiet suffering and how lucky we are to have that suffering. The others would wish they did. There are unexpected intrusions. Even as I plan an experiment on the fMRI, how imagination works in the brain, COVID shuts down the lab, the technician quits. You have your planning, you have your strategies for weddings, for lives, for careers, and unexpected things happen. And this is where imagination enters. Because imagination requires new strategies, reframing, reimagining, construal, and hypothesis. So as you can see, even as we plan our path through the university, even as we plan our path through careers, at every moment, we must be ready to shift our directions because the unexpected happens, whether you're driving a car or failing a course. So as opposed to this action world, we have the world of reactions, the world where defenses can intrude, the world that's filled with expression, the world that is filled with poetry of our lives. Outside events can trigger emotional experiences, bring back memories. You can go to a movie, you can attend a play, you can meet someone who brings back memories of your grandmother, of long lost parts of your life. And we can project onto these situations unresolved emotional residues. Have we not had situations where we've interacted with something and someone where everybody in the situation seems to be moving clearly, and yet something happens and the person begins strangely, or we react strangely because we've triggered something in them, or they've triggered a memory in us that we are not aware of. When I go into a class now, and I teach classes of 100, I begin in the following way. I say to my students, I'm here to be a good boy for 2 hours, and you're here to be responsible for 2 hours. But I acknowledge that in this class, there's poverty, there is illness in the family, there is abuse, physical and sexual, in the family. But you are sitting there, the 100 of you, and I am here talking to you as an expert, and yet what I say must be said delicately, because I can trigger and awaken emotions in you unexpectedly. So it is this triggering that is part of the reaction that we must be sensitive to. And how do we handle that? Through reflection and through transcendence, through entering into our lives, through depth of awareness of ourselves, and through sharing meaning with others, because I can exist because I force and enable you to be in your world. I teach more students with more skin colors, from more places than one can imagine. The students who do research for me are from China, South Asia, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Pakistan, the Middle East, Europe, and we all must accommodate to each other. So that's the everyday life. In the everyday life, we struggle to succeed. In the everyday life, we have goals and hopes. In the everyday life, we have unexpected frustrations that require us to make changes. And that's where the title of the lecture comes in. Imagining ourselves in a changing world. Who are we as we adjust to changes unexpectedly in life? How do we achieve our goals? How do I decide that the program that my parents decided was ideal for me turns out not to be the right one? How do I speak to them? How do I speak to myself? So imagination has these two sides, the instrumental and the expressive. The instrumental is filled with purpose that it helps us achieve goals, and the expressive reaches into our souls, opening the door for emotions and feelings lost in our childhoods. We do research on dolls, and we discovered that women who have these dolls, who have cancer, can take the doll and work with the doll and open the door to a kind of regression that's the basis for health. So what's the point here when I talk about everyday life? When I talk about everyday life, we have the two faces of emotion, actions and reactions, the goal of which is to help us be honest with ourselves, authentic with ourselves. And the deeper we know ourselves, the more readily we can handle a changing world. Now, I have an English department that invited me. So I turned to my own expertise, which is the area of aesthetics. I've done research in aesthetics since 1972 on how people see paintings. And then I fell into the world of people doing read or response. And I did research on reading and research on viewing film. And this is an aspect of imagination because I live in imagination. It comes out of my scriptural studies as a child, where you turn words over in search of meaning. And I turn my interactions with people over in search of opportunities, as I recommend that to the students. We have to be good boys and good girls and good days, achieving the grades to make the teachers happy and the parents happy. But when the crack in the door opens and you see the fit with yourself, you must explore through the light of that door. So now I turn to matters of aesthetics, having dealt with the instrumental and expressive side of everyday life. Now, this is my area of expertise, and I've done all manners of research, and I'm trying to extract, as my father would say, the applesauce. What are the essence of what I've learned that I can share with you? And I encourage the students and faculty alike to explore that corner of the world that they naturally understand given their life experiences. And that is a different issue from school. In school, we have formal courses that we take, but we bring to school an ancestry. We bring to school a family. We bring to school a social class. And in all of these experiences, we bring wisdom and understanding of the family and of the ancients that shape us as authentic individuals. I'm more impressed by authenticity and wisdom than I am by all the publications one can accrue. In aesthetics, we distinguish everyday perception and aesthetic perception. Why is reading special? Why is reading special? In what way is reading special? In what way is looking at painting special? Why does it have value? Why are we doing our study on classical Indian dance? Why are we doing a study on soundscapes and sound compositions that change people and bring them experiences? Let me explain. And then I will always bring it back to the changing world and the changing self, always coming back to the leitmotif as I go through the stepping stones of the lecture. In everyday perception, we just look for information. That's what I was just talking about. We disregard any kind of distracting cues. Is the bear chasing me? Is it not? Is the exam tomorrow or is it not? Am I ready or am I not? Are my parents happy or are they not? These are pragmatic decisions. When we bring that attitude into painting and literature and film, the untrained person just looks for the concrete story. They can't appreciate the aesthetic value because for the aesthetic value, we must change. We must slow down. As if we enter nature and time changes and feeling changes, and we move away from pragmatism to open ourselves to the very style of the work, the sounds, the sights, the movement, the spaces. It requires a radical shift. It requires what we call an aesthetic attitude. And this study of the aesthetic attitude has a very long history in the West. It is the history that I've been exposed to. And I welcome the opportunity to talk with scholars in India about how what I'm going to discuss has manifested itself in your world, how I can foster research among you as I do with other Indian scholars with whom I currently work. I turn to the willing suspension of disbelief. I began by saying imagination and belief are cousins. See, they're cousins. Because we must believe something to be true. And yet, when we escape into our imaginations in the privacy of our life, we can be seen as escaping. Why is that bad? And it was Coleridge who pointed out to us the willing suspension of disbelief. I go into the movies, I go to a play, I go to a dance, I go to some kind of theatrical event, or all the temples I visited in India, and I enter a different time. I move away from the pragmatics of my life and open myself to experience. We move from belief to imagination, from accuracy to fantasy. We open the door and give ourselves permission to imagine. And I go back to the topic of the lecture. Imagine ourselves in the changing world, because the world is changing rapidly. There were no computers in my childhood. There was a giant computer at the University of Michigan, and God help you if when you did the punch cards, you dropped them on the floor, your life would come to an end, because who would know the order in which my students live in a life that we cannot imagine. Those of us who were trained in the 60s, I would send an email message to Russia in 1990, and some would say, we received it, probably to KGB, and we'll get it to Professor Leontiev. The world has changed faster than we have. We are busy catching up, and our students have the greater technical wisdom. They have much to teach us. So I'm going to do a little bit of a historical moment here. And why do I do a historical moment? It's an interesting question. There are psychologists who say that I do not use as a citation anyone who's dead. So I better remain alive if I want to have my work cited. But if we fail to appreciate our history as scholars, as family members, as members of Indian culture of different castes and classes, we lose our souls. So I go back in history. And my mentor now is the most senior historian of psychology living. He's 96 years old. And we get together for coffee and tea. And we go back 200-300 years. And it is a salve of my soul to have that level of wisdom sustain me. So I share a bit of that here. Okay? I'm going to draw an interesting contrast, okay, between enlightened formalism and romantic projectionism. What do I mean by enlightened formalism? I'm going back to Europe in 1685 for the next 50 years and talk about how they shaped not just me, but your country as a colonial location. The aesthetics of the Enlightenment, and think of this in your life. This may be history, but it has meaning today. The aesthetics of the Enlightenment stressed manipulating an audience's imagination and emotion. That's what they wanted to do, to manipulate you. Like when you see a 007 movie, the particular action, the time, etc., manipulates your feelings. They're not telling you an allegory. They're not telling you something rhetorical. So how do we do this? We select the right subject matter. We assume that we share a world in common. We assume that we all have the specialized knowledge. And what is the goal? The goal is to trick us. The goal is mimesis, the controlled imitation of nature. The goal of art is to create a kind of illusion in which a natural world, governed by causality, can immediately be seen. You see the work of art, you understand what it is. You see the play, you understand what it is immediately. We move into the 19th century, and I'm going to bring it as close as the fMRI apparatus. That's how close I will bring it. I will bring this to your brains. In 19th century, they spoke about a formalism. It was the new Enlightenment. The formalists focused on stylistic or structural properties that modify and condition each other and define the medium. They were not concerned about meaning. And do we sometimes not see this in school, where you write a paper, you talk about the meaning, and the teacher just wants you to do a certain kind of pattern, and when you start to interpret, they're not happy. So that's why I've always been on the edge of being a bad boy. because I was always on the edge of interpreting, searching for meaning. It was Fechner, after whose name I won an award for research, who talked about the importance of direct experience, of motivation, of hedonism, that the reason we engage in the arts is because we want excitement and pleasure. Sometimes I'm bored and I go to Netflix and I ask my son, who understands how to manipulate it better than me, David, I need an action movie. I don't want to deal with character. I don't want to deal with meaning. I want purely distraction. So let me just review. There is an approach to knowledge that we have in your university and mine that emphasizes formal realities, that emphasizes form over meaning. You must do your paper a certain way or you lose the grade. If you question us, you are on the edge of sin. I've specialized that my whole life. And as you see, I've survived and I nurture others. That's my job because I've survived. So what's the point? In this tradition that comes from England and Descartes and French neoclassical theater, the idea is if I choose the right character with the right action in the right situation, I will manipulate how you feel. You know, that's not just in the arts, is it? It sounds like everyday life. It sounds like when we deal with people who tell us what they think we want to hear, who exert control. On the other side, we have a kind of what's referred to as projectionism, a kind of romantic theater. In the early 1700s, the Schlegels, these are names you don't know, the papers are there in my portfolio. All of my papers and my books are available on ResearchGate. If you go to ResearchGate, you can find all of my papers there and my book for free for openers, okay? August Schlegel was against any idea that the drama could be like what these British people and French neoclassicists said. We're not trying to trick the spectator through the senses into believing that something is real. Theater should reflect social reality, but that in an Indian context. Theater should reflect social reality and the traditions of the audience and enhance social awareness. You know, I sort of teach with that philosophy. My goal is not to manipulate my students into realizing that Professor Cupchik is so smart and so correct. My goal is to help them find themselves, which is why I do this lecture for you. I encourage that. By selecting critical moments in life and expressing them in carefully fashioned dialogue, the playwright can expose the character's mind. The author can show the motives behind the actions that unfold in a play. So the unity of action is more important than the unity of time and place. By providing a meaningful context to account for action, the author brings coherence and meaningfulness to the audience's response. There's an important point there. What is a successful moment in teaching? What is a successful moment in conversation as I'm having with you now? A successful moment in conversation is that I open the door for you to feel the authenticity of your life, to express the authenticity of your life, to reach into the history of your being, and to share it with others, because is that not what meaningful theater is? A meaningful lecture is meaningful theater. August Schlegel, his cousin, talked about aesthetic illusion lies in imagination. And it was Schlegel who translated Shakespeare into German. He described the ways that illusion is shaped by events on the theatrical stage, a kind of waking dream to which we voluntarily surrender ourselves. Is this not what a successful movie is? Is this not the research that we're doing now in Indian classical dance between the formal and the more relaxed? How we enter into that event and how we feel ourselves as if on the stage. And this is why I'm working with one of the choreographers and dancers of Teatro alla Scala di Milano, one of the top dance companies in the world, that she permits me to even speak about what it means to understand dance and share the moment. It was Schlegel who had the idea that reality and illusion coexist, belief and imagination coexist, the reality of the dramatic dialogue is that the text is written. The illusion is that it's spoken spontaneously. Is that not sweet? The reality is the text that you study when you're doing your drama class, but how do you perform it? I read my lecture as framed before me, but how do I perform it so I can communicate with you in the tone of the voice and in the pacing? And these ideas were captured in the work of the famous Samuel Taylor Coleridge. And it was he who talked about the willing suspension of disbelief. We must permit ourselves to enter into the worlds of the storyteller. Yes, when I was a little boy, my mother would say to me, "What would you like in the story?" And I would say, "I want this and this and this." And she would make up the story on the spot. And what would I do? That's how I learned to be a professor, by making up stories on the spot and hopefully convincing my students to listen. Now, we think we're so modern. Psychologists think they're so modern because we have so many techniques that we work with. But the idea of empathy comes from the 1800s, not the 20th century, and before. It was Robert Fischer in 1870s in his PhD talked about Einfühlung, feeling oneself into the artwork, feeling oneself into drama. He described processes related to sensation and feeling, emphasizing how the physiology of the body conditions emotional response. 1870, that's when the guy was writing his dissertation. He proposed these different levels of engagement that go deeper and deeper and deeper. Mere sensations get transformed from ideas into actual feelings, and this is the beauty of it. When we resonate to the event on the stage, we project ourselves in the theater. We build a bridge to the theater. And these ideas were carried over into the 20th century by Lipps, L-I-P-P-S, in the early 1900s, who said we spontaneously imitate events on the stage. We project ourselves into the work. So let me just review this. You can be in a lecture as a professor or as a student and be detached. You can be technical. You can be a good boy, good girl, or good day and write down the notes. But are we communicating? Are we doing the business of mind? Am I opening the door for you to be yourself? This is the foundation of success as a professor. We hope for it. It's never guaranteed. I communicate with some students better than others. You communicate with some friends better than others. I can explain my ideas to people who are very detached. It doesn't work. We need to dance together for a successful lecture, for successful research. Now I'm going to turn to Isser and reader response theory. I fell into it. I became president of an organization founded in 1983, the International Society for the Empirical Study of Literature. And these were people who were mad at their high school teachers, professors in Europe who were mad at their high school teachers, who told them there's only one way to read a text. This is the official meaning of the text. And when you write your exam, you better give me back what I want. Reader response theory, very much in the 1970s anti-war style, emphasized what the text means to me as an individual and to me as a member of a social group. But here's something beautiful that comes back to imagination. Isser was working in the tradition of Gestalt psychology. And the tradition of Gestalt psychology, coming out of the Romantics, says there are breaks in the story. And you must enter the story to fill it with meaning. You are invited into the story. And that is the difference between expository and literary text. Factual text just wants you to repeat it back. Literary texts invite you to interpret, to enter yourself, to bring your own meaning. As a child, when I did religious study, in the tradition I was raised in, words were turned over in search of meaning. And I've carried that into psychology, turning over words and operations, looking for the hidden assumptions. It is that kind of openness that sustains a career, the search for good continuation. And this is exactly how aesthetics was described by Shklovsky in 1918. He said the purpose of aesthetics is to make things difficult. The purpose of aesthetics is to invite, he's speaking of artworks, to invite interpretation. And I would go more broadly. The purpose of education is to share with our students the current state of knowledge as transmitted by the professor, and the crack in the door is open for the student to bring himself, herself, themselves to bear, to offer an interpretation of the text, to provide the foundation of innovation. It's just like reading. We watch the movie go along, and there's a break in the plot that we can't figure out. We watch the ideas in our disciplines go along, and there are breaks in the methodology into which we can't enter and offer creative solutions. What's the point? Suggestions meet connections. That's the principle here. Suggestion meets connection. And I go back again and again and again to the title of the lecture, Imagining Ourselves in a Changing World. Imagine ourselves where there are breaks in the unfolding of the world in all the different disciplines that provide a crack in the door for a student of whatever background, rich or poor, higher caste, lower caste, to bring their lives to bear. And that is the insight. And then I asked the question of the professors, are we ready to let them through the door? Do we have the humility to let them through the door? Because they will take it over anyways. They will be the ones who innovate. We did not see the computers coming, or I would be sitting here surrounded by money and not books. I'm going to take a little digression into reading. Then I'm going to turn to something, again, back to the theme. I will come full circle in the lecture to where I started. We did some very interesting work on reading, and I asked, what is the nature of experience when you read? Because we see the content of the story and the meaning of the story. But what about the space? What about the time? What about causality that might break down? What is about the feeling of sensations? And what is about our closeness or distance aesthetically from the work? Okay. Because when we go into the aesthetic mode, we've done research on experience of nature. And I call it chilled out, blissed out, and freaked out. I can lie on the grass looking at the moon in a warm night, which is not for night in Toronto. It would be not happy lying in the snow. And I can feel relaxed. The 60s language is chilled out. Or I can lie on the grass and look at the moon and see God, blissed out. Or I can lie on the grass and feel the fear of project and future and be freaked out and find nature as something scary, nature that I turn away from. Are these not the people we have to reawaken to preserve the earth? So we have the experiential foundation of aesthetics, what I call the plasticity of experience. When you go to a play or to a movie and you leave the real world behind, you enter into a closed space, a space of intimacy, a space where you reach out to others, a space where you feel meaning, a space where you feel yourself. And that's what we did. We found that some people read literature in a sympathetic way. It's your story. I get it. It's your story. This happened to you. And others listen to it empathically. It could have happened to me. I have had that kind of illness in my family. I have had that kind of loss in my family. I therefore understand you. Is this not the foundation for building bridges in a changing world? Where we bring the aesthetics into the changing world? I feel your world. I feel your space. I feel your challenges. Because in order for me to be permitted to be myself, I must permit you to be yourself. And so we looked at close and far readings, because how do we have these aesthetic experiences? The close reading, I read the story and feel as if I move through the room. James Joyce's stories, I am there. I am in the verse. I am in the sound of the poetics. And far readings, they're just purposeful, inferential. And so let me go back and pull some strings together before I go on. We have the survival mode. We have the experiential mode. We have the approach to aesthetics where they want to control you. Through mimesis, we see a 007 movie. We surrender to the speed of the narrative and the uncertainty. We feel the excitement. We feel the pleasure. But there isn't a lot of depth, is there? And so when we share a story of our life with someone else, and we watch a film or read a book about someone else, is it not our responsibility to open ourselves? And it's so much easier when they have gone through the same path of life as us. And is this not the foundation for a successful university? I do research now on equity, diversity, and inclusion, a major theme in our universities and research in Canada. And so I see students who come from different communities, who know kids from their communities, but they come to the university, they go from cliques into networks, shared interests. And is not the theme of my lecture imagining ourselves in a changing world, to embrace the opportunity that the university has afforded us, to enter the worlds of the students sitting next to you about whom you know nothing, who's a different color, a different religion, a different background? Is this not the foundation of reconciliation? Is this not the foundation for building bridges across religious groups? I have a study that I'm doing now on the arrival in Canada of people from the Middle East. And why do I do it? Because I have a wonderful student who's an observant Muslim, and another wonderful student who's a Coptic Christian. And I know they will love each other because they are so wonderful in their wholesomeness. And I am doing this project just for them, for the pleasure of having them work together. You see the attitude? You see the orientation? It's imagining ourselves in a changing world in a dynamic way, open with honesty to our depths. And so the last concept I'm putting here is the thinking I, EYE, and the being I. The thinking I, and all these papers are on ResearchGate. The thinking I analyzes the work. The thinking I hang out with artists. I don't hang out with professors. My friends are artists, okay? That's my world. And my wife's the doctor's world. We hang out with artists. And so I sit and quietly listen and even publish with some of them how they strategize around their compositions and their colors. The thinking I plans. The thinking I plans in daily life. The thinking I plans in art. EYE. But what about the being I? Huh? Capital I. To what extent did the students affirm in their life the legitimacy of the being I, being myself? not having to knuckle under to the demands of mommy and daddy who want me to be this and that because I've discovered in myself that I'm homosexual. I've discovered in myself that I'm not going to be a doctor. I've discovered in myself whatever the student has discovered in themselves. We did a study on homosexuals in the Middle East where it's not exactly accepted. And the family sits on the kid, and the parents sit on the kid, and the kid hates himself, herself. So when I speak about the being I speak about affirming the legitimacy of being ourselves. And they're both complementary. Because in order for little Jerry to have decided to become a professor when he was 12 and to have lucked out to do it, take it from me, I learned strategy. I developed what we call street smarts. And all the professors sitting there know exactly what I mean, because they've all passed through the politics of their world. But yet, how do we maintain the integrity of the being of myself? That is our challenge. And so now I come full circle in my lecture. Because in the everyday life, the thinking I responds to the challenges from the outside and helps us fill our goals and desires. In the aesthetic life, the thinking I attends movies and follows shows to remind us of ordinary life and modulate feelings of pleasure and excitement. The thinking I treats the imagination as a resource to help us reframe our lives when there are obstacles. It keeps an eye out, so to speak, helps us survive and thinks about opportunity. So I want to emphasize that. When we plan our careers, when we plan our courses, when we plan how to make mommy and daddy happy, when we plan how to make the professor happy so they give us a good grade, we need our street smarts. We need our strategies, because every professor sitting here smiling says, Cupchik, how come you know what my life is like? That's why we're sitting here, because we've all survived. But is this not something that we must convey the street smarts to the students? It's not just that they match. The university has the notion of inclusive excellence, but whose excellence is it? I want inclusive authenticity. I want the inclusion. Suddenly the sound is upon us. Oh, it became quiet again. I want inclusive authenticity. I want people to be themselves, because is that not the foundation of success? Is that not the foundation of choosing the right career path? Is that not the foundation of choosing that domain of research in which one can excel? And I turn finally to the being. In everyday life, the being capital I, helps us find our identity and meaning in the world around us, in a changing world. It helps us identify a self that includes the skills we need to find meaning in our lives. The being I must find meaning in his, her, their life. It incorporates images filled with emotion and captures our experience. It is the locus of our souls. That is my advocacy. Students come to me, I had a student come to me with clown makeup. And a professor might say, a student with clown makeup, what are you doing in my office? And she's now my most wonderful research assistant, because she liked theater and it was of interest to her. In other words, my job is to find my gifts in my students and their gifts, to help them nurture their gifts, their being I. In the aesthetic life, being I recognize plays and films and books, but resonates with the challenges we face, helps us gain a higher level of understanding while vicariously fulfilling our needs and dreams on stage. And the point in the end is this, dear friends, that the instrumental life and the expressive life are complementary, because we cannot succeed without understanding the instrumental life, the courses we have to take, the paths we have to choose, what criteria we must fulfill in order to succeed. but the expressive life lets us be true to ourselves. So they play a complementary role. We must have both. We must be strategic while being playful. We must be successful while remaining human. And so in closing, I say, in the end, there's only humility, because we're lucky to have both. So what's the point? I titled this lecture, Imagining Ourselves in a Changing World, because we have the right to imagine ourselves. We have the right to freedom. I have a friend who was a dean of Saudi Arabia who said to the girls in her school, where she was the dean, find a place that's safe inside of yourself and live there. Is that not true for us all? We must build a bridge in the end between the safe space within ourselves and our responsibility to society as a whole. If I am lucky enough to decide at the age of 12 to be a professor and to have survived to be a professor, now to do it for 50 years without a diminishment of energy, then it is incumbent upon me to take care of you, which is why I'm here. So thank you for listening. I've left my email address, Gerald, Gerald, period, Cupchik, Cupchik, not CK, it's not Cook Chicken, Cupchik at utoronto.ca. You can go to ResearchGate, the platform where all my papers are, and even my book for free. And if you have thoughts and questions, don't hesitate to write, because I know what happens. We invite students to ask questions and everybody's too nervous to do so. You can do it privately. So again, thank you for your patient listening. I very much appreciate it. It's half past midnight here in Toronto and nicely the middle of the day where you are. So thank you again. There we go. That's it. Done. If you guys want to ask questions, ask questions. I've done my job, so to speak.
Thank you very much, Dr. Gerald Cupchik. Now there are students who are joined through live streaming. They may not have direct access to ask the question.
That's why they can send me little notes. They can send love letters privately. I will
Definitely
answer
they
them at the room. Go
They
ahead.
will, as you have shared your email ID with them, they will definitely share the questions or send email to you about the questions, and then you can reply to them.
I am here for them. That's why I do this. It's very simple. I am here for them. I am busy with the 5 million things I do, but if we are lucky enough to have been professors and to have survived, it's incumbent upon us to take care of the next generations. So thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. We have been lucky enough to listen to you, because at the age of 75 also, you will have that much energy to inspire the students, teachers, researchers, and enlighten us with your valuable thoughts about imagining ourselves in the changing world. Now I call upon Dr. M.A. Matre, Chairman and Chairperson of this Students' Council and Students' Welfare Committee, for formal vote of thanks.
So, good morning, sir. On behalf of C.K. Thakur College, as well as Department of English and Student Council and Welfare, I am highly privileged to extend vote of thanks. Our college is in deep gratitude that Dr. Professor Gerald Cupchik granted their precious time to enlighten our students. And it is foremost to figure where we belong in. As an individual, it is foremost to figure out where do we stand in the changing world. You carefully highlighted how imagination and belief closely cross each other paths, how imaginations are playing a role in making our life successful. And again, behalf of college, definitely I would like to thank you, sir. And on this occasion, I would like to thank our management, principal, and officials to help us in organizing this guest lecture. And especially, I would like to thank Professor Dr. Evle, sir, to communicate you and all the organization of this guest lecture. And last, I would like to thank all my council member, welfare member, as well as students who joined this lecture. And for technical assistant, I would like to thank Dr. Vazekar, sir, for organizing this, and IQAC chairman. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you
Thank
very
you,
much.
everybody.
Students, you
pleasure.
can leave now.
Okay, thank you, sir.
They can run away and they can send me a message whenever they would like. No problem. I'm here for them and for you guys. Simple.
Thank you
Thank you very much.
Just a minute,
And
sir.
now-
You can stop the recording now. We are
That's right.
stopping the recording.
And now I will go to sleep since it's now half past 12 in Canada and I have a busy day tomorrow. So-
Okay, sir. Thank you very much. I'll
It's
come back
already
to you.
tomorrow. Thanks very much. Best wishes.
Okay, then.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Good
Bye.
morning in advance. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. Chalo, finally it is done.